Audio check 321 321.
Good evening everyone, hello and welcome to this meeting of the Local Plan Committee. I'm Chair Councillor Tim Young. This meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. To begin, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the grand jury room by going back through the main entrance and down the stairs or via the staircase the side of the building and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronald Street. And then have a short break at 7:30 p.m. Please would all speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphone when not speaking. I would say that we've just heard that one of our excellent officers, Bethany Jones, is leaving the council. She's not here tonight, but to move to another authority, and we'd like to thank her. I'm sure the committee would like to pay tribute to all the work Beth did while she, or still doing while she's at this council, and thank her for her service. Thank you very much. Right, introduction. We're going to go round the table and ask each member and officer to introduce themselves, starting with the Vice Chair.
Councillor Mick Spindler, Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Rees-Smithson, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Faye Smalls, Old Heath, The Hive and Rowhead.
Councillor Vanessa Moffat, Mile End Ward.
Councillor Elizabeth Alakiakinyemi, Greenstead Ward.
Councillor Kirkby Taylor, Castle Ward.
Councillor Martin Parsons, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward, and I am substituting for Councillor Andrew Ellis.
Councillor Sean Kelly, Wivenhoe Ward.
Lewis Barber, Lexington Braeswood Ward.
Lucy Massey, Colchester City Council Planning Policy Officer.
Laura Goulding, Planning Policy Officer.
Simon Gaines, Joint Head of Planning.
Sandra Scott, Place Strategy Manager.
Karen Syrett, Joint Head of Planning.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all. So we've just got the one substitution, as was said. Councillor Dundas is substituting for Councillor Ellis. Move on to item 3, urgent items. Are there any? No, thank you, Rob. There are no urgent items. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? Looking around the table, there don't appear to be any. Okay, we'll move to item 5, which is the minutes of the meetings held on the 5th of November before the committee for confirmation. Any points of accuracy that need to be raised? Yes, Councillor Kirkby Taylor.
Just on the last page, it was requested that we say the evidence is explicitly included, not that it just can be included for the Middlewick supplementary information, but it appears to have been included anyway, so I think we're okay on that.
Okay, Rob? Yeah.
If, as you say, Councillor Cope, if it has been included, I can look at making an amendment, but you just have to give me a minute before, or we can look at doing it later in the meeting if you give me a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we'll do it later. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for raising it. Can we agree with those minutes then with that slight amendment? Thank you. Right, we move on to General Have Your Say. I've got 4 speakers, and starting with Richard Martin, please. Mr. Martin, you know the score. You've got 3 minutes, bell after 2, and then end after 3, and then you'll get a minute to come back after the response. Time will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. As you will hear from others tonight and experts over the months and years, Middlewick Ranges is ecologically unviable for development. I won't repeat what's already been said, but I will focus why we are still here. In 2017, when Middlewick was unexpectedly added to the local plan, with no ecological assessment to accompany the decision, what the council did know was that the site was a local wildlife site, an important one at that. Even the most basic research would have revealed a 2008 planning application suggesting Middlewick's potential for SSSI designation by the council's own ecologist and senior museum curator, and the extension of the Lowe's boundary in 2015, significant red flags. According to the MPPF, the presumption should always have been against development, not for. Some have labelled us distraction suggestions we hinder the council's progress. I ask, is it wrong to stand up for what is right, to follow the evidence? Many of you here sitting tonight have fought for issues in your own wards, whether it's flood prevention, pylons or community facilities, all causes worthy of attention. Yet are those distractions? Yet here we are, criticised for dedicating thousands of unpaid hours, often working throughout the night, to document Middlewick's unique biodiversity. We don't get allowances for this, though a passing member of the public might offer us a pack of biscuits now and then. However, the significant new data confirming the value already laid out in previous years have made this a very worthy endeavour, as has the wonderful community. Middlewick is not only an irreplaceable wildlife site, it's a site of national significance. So much so that one of the UK's leading mycologists made an 800-mile round trip at 2 a.m. to survey its fungi, confirming it meets SSSI designation criteria for grassland fungi alone. This adds to the growing consensus among local and national experts that Middlewick satisfies multiple SSSI thresholds. So I ask this committee, will you commit to publish the interim independent ecology report as soon as it is available, rather than forcing the public to rely on freedom of information requests? Transparency is critical. This report will either confirm or challenge development allocation, and we all deserve to know the truth without unnecessary delays. Middlewick's fate is not just about one site, it's a test of this council's commitment to due process, environmental policy and a sound decision making. Will you ensure that this process respects those principles? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. All I can say is that I went pains to ask Karen to explain the process at the last meeting. We will follow the process, we will get all the evidence, obtain all the evidence, and it will be made public as soon as we possibly can. I don't think the officers need to respond. Have your extra minute.
Thank you very much. Just like a slight alteration to the speech, which I didn't know about until this weekend. The mycologist I spoke of also made a second 800-mile round trip yesterday. Without her, we wouldn't know exactly how valuable Middlewick is actually now going to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution tonight, Mr. Martin. Our next Have Your Say speaker is Martin Pugh, please. Martin. If you could come forward as soon as possible, please. We've got a lot to get through tonight. 1,300 pages. Thank you, Martin. You have 3 minutes. Bell will sound after 2, and then you finish when the second bell. Thank you.
Evening. I had to reword my speech actually in light of breaking news from Middlewick over this weekend. Middlewick waxcap total has increased to astonishing 22 species. Yesterday, Emma Williams added June waxcap, Hygroscibes conicoides, perfectly suited to Middlewick's sandy, acidic grasslands, including the northern allocation area. So that's now 22 waxcaps. SSSI threshold is 19. Really significant. This is even without microscopy or eDNA analysis, which is expected to expand this remarkable list. Emma is a nationally renowned expert. Many of you will now have heard of Emma Williams, who trains Natural England staff. She actually prioritised Middlewick over other sites, travelled through the night, as Richard said, from 2 a.m. to spend every daylight hour on Middlewick yesterday with our surveyors. Really a Herculean effort. We're really indebted to her taking on Middlewick. So on Middlewick Northern Grasslands, she said, these fields are acidic. There's no arguing that at all. I don't know who's saying any different. It's screaming acidic. You won't find glutinoglossom or anything other than acid soil. She also said, this site has so much to offer. I only scratched the surface of its fungal conservation value. eDNA will reveal more species not fruiting during my survey. Habitats of this quality are exceptional in the region, exceptionally rare. This may be the best. It must be retained for nature, biodiversity, and the community. We're glad now to hear that Natural England are coming round to this in the face of overwhelming evidence, as are Colchester City Council. And let me emphasise this professional fungi survey was conducted because of Friends of Middlewick only, because we commissioned it, despite raising the need for one with the council in early November. Without this, crucial indicators of the site's value, including waxcaps, barbicel bats, nightingales, would have been overlooked again. It's clear this site, allocated in 2016 without ecological surveys, as we've heard, despite its local wildlife site status, cannot accommodate development without breaching local plan policy or MPPF. As Natural England stated, such development would conflict with stringent local plan policy. Colchester City Council now has a chance to set a national example by prioritising nature recovery, community well-being and climate resilience over unsustainable development, which Middlewick really is the case in point of unsustainable development. Friends of Middlewick now offer collaboration to reimagine the site as a nature reserve and a community asset, something Colchester can be proud of. And my question, echoing Richard's, but also following on from that, will the Council now look into alternative sites and avoid any further delays in looking at other sites if that is indeed needed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just repeat the answer I gave to Mr. Martin. We will look at all the evidence and we will publish everything we get as soon as we possibly can. You have your extra minute.
Thank you. I'd still like an answer to my question, will you be looking at alternative sites, which I think is really important, given that we've lost a lot of time. We knew Middlewick was very special. We knew the evidence was going this way, that it was really undevelopable and undeliverable in the true sense of the words. So I kind of repeat that, whether or not you want to get back to me in writing, whether you start that ball rolling, looking at other sites, so we can't say, you know, our hands are tied. Also, I'd like to reiterate the point and ask the question again. Can you name individuals looking at the BAT evidence and NITE evidence, the suitably qualified ecologists, which is really important? Obviously, you've got an expert in inverts and botany who probably aren't well placed to look at barber cell data or nightingale data. That would be reassuring to hear who's looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we will look at all the evidence, we will look at all sites, and we will come up with we'll follow the process as we have to. Can't give you an answer tonight, but we will look at all sites and we will agree a local plan next year, as Karen outlined at the last meeting. I don't think we've got the names, have we, of the people looking at the bats yet? Sandra?
No, we haven't. I think, as we've said before, the ecologists are looking at the invertebrates and botanical survey, and Natural England are reviewing everything that is also sent to them. So we don't have a name, no, at the moment.
Just very quickly, so you're looking at,
No,
you said you
can't have any more, Martin, sorry. Thank you. No. Next speaker, please. Dr. Jeremy Dagley. You know the score as well, Jeremy, don't you? So your time will start when you start speaking.
Our presentation this evening from Essex Wildlife Trust seeks to firstly recap where we are now, but as importantly, and as some of the other speakers have said, to look to the future. A recap of how we got here. The allocation, just to remind councillors, was made without gathering evidence, as said by an earlier speaker. Middlewick Ranges was allocated for development in 2017, despite being designated as a local wildlife site and completely contrary to National Planning Policy Framework NPPF guidelines. There was a failure to apply the mitigation hierarchy. The council and Standard at the time ignored the mitigation hierarchy's first step, which is avoidance. Thirdly, to add insult to injury, the mitigation proposed was completely unachievable. Fourthly, the entirely discredited Stantec report contained fabricated data, with a habitat map in the north and south particularly that had no resemblance to reality. The latest findings of a nationally important community of acid grassland fungi, as we've just heard, its significance confirmed by Natural England in the last couple of weeks, highlight the enormous gaps in the ecological data presented to your council at the time. The current position, as a local wildlife site, Middlewick Ranges is already a height of high strategic significance, as defined by DEFRA's statutory guidance. Natural England, furthermore, has now stated that all the data gathered by the multiple national experts has demonstrated Middlewick's potential national significance. As a result, the housing allocation would be, in Natural England's words, contrary to the local plan policy that relates to Middlewick Ranges site allocation, contrary to local plan policies that relate to impacts on the natural environment, and contrary to National Planning Policy Framework guidance. The situation would be unacceptable to Natural England and would lead to a strong objection. With this in mind, we look forward to an interim report from the Council's ecological consultants. So the future. The new local plan, with these multiple confirmations of the site's overriding importance for wildlife, for the local nature recovery strategy, and for local residents' well-being, presents a fantastic opportunity for your council to fulfil its ambition of creating a better environment. As paragraph 192 of the NPPF, which was just published last week by the government, states, plans should identify, map and safeguard components of local wildlife-rich habitats and ecological networks, including the hierarchy of international, national and locally designated sites of importance for biodiversity, wildlife corridors and stepping stones that connect them, and areas identified by national and local partnerships for habitat management, enhancement, restoration and creation. So the Trust stands ready to work energetically with your council and its councillors, the MOD and DIO, the Friends of Middlewick and others in planning Middlewick's nature positive future. With the Council's enhanced biodiversity duty and working with the Essex Local Nature Partnership, Middlewick can contribute to an outstanding ecological network along the wildlife corridor of the Roman River Valley.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. All that will be taken into account, and I'm sure we will work with the Essex Wildlife Trust on all the issues, but as I said, the process is the process. We have to follow the evidence, and the evidence, as you say, is coming in thick and fast, and we will take account of it. Please have your extra minute.
Thank you, Chair. I think just for my extra minute, I think clarifying the process, the concern that I had at the last meeting on the 5th of November was that we know that this has been called an interim ecological report. Now, that's partly because there's some survey work that was due for March, but we know what data's come in. We know how overwhelming that data is, as Chair's just said. I'm concerned that the interim report, if it's seen as interim, even with Natural England reviewing it along with the Council, what does that do to the process? I know you're meeting on the 17th of February, presumably, as you said at the last meeting, to make a decision. So what I would hate to see is any delay in removing Middlewick from the local plan for the sake of an extra month when you have pretty much all the data you need. I don't know whether we can answer that, but it would be really useful to know that this interim isn't going to delay things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There will be no delay, I promise you. We will follow the process. We've got the dates in the diary, and that's what we're following. We'll have all the evidence. We've got a lot tonight, and we will make a decision as per the timetable. Thank you. Our last Have Your Say speaker tonight is Sir Bob Russell. Bob, if you can come forward. I think you're familiar with the process.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just observe, as somebody who's opposed to the Middlewick development from when it first raised its ugly head in 2017, I'd like to endorse the comments made previously and observe also that outcomes are more important than process. And I suspect that if councillors were to vote now on what the information is now available, those councillors around the table here who voted yes may well have voted no, and I would observe that only the Deputy Chairman sitting here tonight voted no. I'd like now to briefly talk about Salary Brook, Chairman. I did copied you in on my latest objections to the latest consultation, which I'm getting a bit tired of because they're a bit of a farce by the people who undertake the tendering Colchester borders. And specifically, I would observe that the whole reason for this development proceeding was on the promise of a link road from Elmsted dual carriageway across to the A120. That's not going to happen for 17 to 27 years. And the notion that everyone's going to get on a bus down Clingo Hill, I think, is wishful thinking. The other bit is that we were promised, led to believe everything you like to say over the several years of consultation of which you and other Grinstead Ward councillors were a part, that there'll be no buildings visible from Grinstead and Longridge on the new development. There'll be nothing you could see over the brow of the hill. That I would hope that you will insist is given in writing and plans stating categorically, because I don't trust the developers on this. I'll leave it at that. Coming on to the Abro site, Chairman, that was an interesting one, wasn't it, where 20 councillors didn't want it and the officers wanted it. And just as an observation, that if the government's proposals for planning reform were in place now, you would have had no say. 20 councillors would have been trumped by the planning department, and that is almost a death knell to local democracy when people elect councillors and councillors will not be able to determine what goes on in their locality. That's not democracy. That's how it operates in the People's Republic of China, where officials make decisions. And however good our planning officers are, they are not accountable to the people. You are the elected representatives of the people. You are here to represent the public. It cannot be right that in a democracy, officers will make decisions and elected members won't have their say. Can I just ask this question, Chairman? I've established through a freedom of information that between the two sections of that planning meeting, the officers of this council were engaged in 18 communications with the developers and vice versa, although councillors had been told categorically by the chairman they should not communicate. What is going on?
Thank you, Sir Bob. That was more a matter for the planning committee than the local planning committee, but we do have our joint heads of planning here who may be able to confirm or deny what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll make a start. First of all, in terms of the reference to changes to planning committees, there's a consultation paper being published which sets out 3 options for proposed delegations. This is just a consultation at the moment. Like I say, there's 3 options, and I don't think any of them do away with planning committee in its entirety. I don't think this council would notice much difference, to be quite honest, if any of the options were implemented, because we do tend to focus on the more important applications such as ABRO. So I don't think that would change. In terms of what was said at the meeting, I don't recall the chairman saying not to speak to officers, but not to speak to the developers. But Simon might recall differently, although he wasn't at the first meeting. But that does normally happen in between an application being deferred. And the third point was about Salary Brook, but issues to do with the garden community are best addressed to the joint committee, I think.
Thank you. Simon, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just really to confirm that the limited communication that was had with the developer was very much of a responsive nature and related to the proposed elevational changes to the development fronting onto the monument in terms of members' aspiration to up the design standard, and responding very much to the matters which had been raised at committee by external architects inputting into the design process. So really, in terms of your officer involvement, it was relatively limited in terms of trying to deliver the aspirations of the committee to improve the overall standard of the development. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. So Bob, you have another minute.
Chairman, this was one meeting which was adjourned. It's not separate meetings. I'll just leave it there. I'll just leave it hanging there. The councillors were told not to discuss it, but officers discussed it with the applicant and with a member of the public, which is of interest. On the ABRO site, let it not be forgotten, if Councillor Pam Cox had not called it in, officers would have made the decision. And it's that sort of scenario which I think councillors should be wary of, because it's a complete failure of democratic decision-making, democratic accountability. If elected members who are entrusted by their electorate to represent them, if they are under one of the proposals, or 2 or 3, because I haven't read all the detail, but the idea is that councillors will have less say in future if any of these proposals go forward, and those 20 councillors who objected to the ABRO application would not have been able to speak, let alone vote on it, if some of these proposals go ahead. And I hope that Colchester City Council this committee will be making representations to the 3 members of Parliament to vote against anything which dilutes or totally takes away the powers of councillors to make decisions.
Thank you, Bob. We've heard that. We've heard that. And on Salary Brook, I know Councillor Julie Young has responded to you on behalf of the 3 councillors. The chair of the planning committee is also here tonight, and I'm sure he's heard what you've said as well. So We take it on board. Right, okay.
I'm not criticising him.
No, I understand that. Thank you for your contribution tonight, Sir Bob. Okay, that's the have your say item completed. We'll now move on to item 7 on our agenda tonight, which is the monitoring statement 2024. We have no have your say speakers for this item, so I'll invite Laura to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The committee is asked to approve the monitoring statement for the period April 2023 to March 2024 and agree to it being published on the Council's website. The Council usually publish an authority monitoring report known as an AMR annually in December. However, as the Council is currently undertaking a review of the local plan, this report is a shorter monitoring statement published for 2024, which will capture key information and data regarding the planning service and preparation of the development plan. The local plan review commenced with an iterative issues and options from autumn 2023 to summer 2024. The evidence base to support the local plan is also progressing. An update of the local plan review is covered by a separate item on this agenda. Key findings in this monitoring period include the total number of applications, major, minor and others, i.e. change of use and listed building consent received between the 1st of April 2023 and the 21st of March 2024 of 1,455 shows a decrease on last year's total of 1,722. This figure, however, does not include all applications, i.e. discharge of conditions and preliminary inquiries. Decision rates remain high, with 96% of minor applications decided within 8 weeks, a slight increase from the previous figure of 95% recorded in the previous year. 100% of major applications were determined within 13 weeks or within the extended timeframe agreed with the applicant. A net of 1,098 dwellings were built between the 1st of April 2023 and the 31st of March 2024. This is above the objectively assessed need target of 120 dwellings a year for Colchester and higher than the previous years of 711. A total of 275 affordable homes have been delivered across Colchester, of which 231 new build affordable housing units were delivered, consisting of 178 affordable rent, 5 first homes and 48 were shared ownership. Outside of Section 106 and the Council's development company, a further 44 affordable units have been delivered through the Council's acquisitions programme. Officers want to take this opportunity to update you all on the neighbourhood plan progress during the monitoring period and today. Following successful referendums, these neighbourhood plans are made at full council and now form part of the Colchester development plan. These are Tiptree, Copford with Eastthorpe and Great Tay. Myland and Braeswick neighbourhood plan review commenced examination in July 2023. The examiner issued his final report on the 13th of September 2023 and concluded that the review meets the basic conditions and a referendum was not required. The plan was formally made by full council on the 17th of October 2023. Although outside of the monitoring period, in November 2024, the Council approved the West Burgolt Neighbourhood Plan Review 2024 as a minor non-material modification review of the original plan. The plan review succeeds the original neighbourhood plan to form part of the Colchester City Development Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'll invite members of the committee if they've got questions or comments. I've got Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm perhaps slightly out of touch with exactly where we are on TCB, GC on some things, but it says on the tendering Colchester Borders DPD adoption in 2024, bearing in mind we are December the 16th, has that happened then, or is that going to happen in the next 14, 15 days?
Laura?
It's on page 24 of the agenda pack.
Quickly looking up now. Page 24. Page 24 of 1,342.
I think the answer is no. It will be amended to reflect the joint committee dates.
Okay. So that will be amended? Yeah. Thank you for pointing it out, Councillor Dundas. Well done. Any other questions? Good. Then can I ask us to approve that the Local Plan Committee approved the 2024 monitoring update report with that change for publication on the Council's website and invite the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the outcome of the vote when we take it. All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. If it all goes as quickly as that tonight, we'll be very happy. Move on to item 8, infrastructure funding statement. I have one visiting councillor who wishes to speak on this item, and that's Councillor Sunnox. William, if you could come forward, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I actually want to speak on the next item, but it all merges into one, really, because we have an infrastructure audit at last. We have a start on the infrastructure audit, and this is massively good news that we're underway on it. But it's a good start. We have much further to go if we want to have it as a coherent lobbying tool. It isn't that yet. And something that will provide supporting data for a SIL, a community infrastructure levy, and also to inform Section 106 negotiations, and also to have a credible narrative for both NIMBY objectives to housing and the planning inspector. And it's worth remembering that it was on this very subject, it was on infrastructure provision, that the big garden community plans failed back in 2020. Now, I know that this is 281-page report in the middle of a 1,300-page document pack, and not many people will have studied it in as much detail as I have. And I really don't envy you having to look at so many pages, but I think it can be made manageable. This bit of it can be made manageable if we put it in the right analytical framework. And what I'm going to suggest is that we need a top-down approach. We've started, but we need to continue. We need a top-down approach to complement the bottom-up approach we've started. That we should split the projects needed into 4 categories according to the source of funding, stating where the money will come from. There'll be a healthy debate about the costings and classifications, and rightly so, but we desperately need a plan, a real plan that says what we will do and who will pay, not an unquantified wish list. I'm going to suggest 4 categories: government funding, utility company funding, Section 106 funding, and SIL funding, which we don't have at the moment, but I very much hope we'll put that on the fast track to get it. And the government-funded projects, I don't think we should lobby for everything, but obviously it's the big road projects. It's the A1331, it's the A120, and it's the A12 money. And we should be working with our MPs to articulate the case for that. And that's not come out of the report at this stage. It sort of reads, as it is at the moment, it reads more almost like a sustainability study, where it's a long list of things we'd like to do. Only a very small minority of them have got pound signs by them or costing. And I think it becomes too big a job if we try to do it bottom up. We've got to do it top down with benchmarking against other areas and against national averages. And as I say, articulating the case and identify the macro needs and then taking it down to the micro. The utility projects, we've got some big ones there. We've got we've got a desalination plant that needs to be done at Holland-on-Sea and so on. And that's the matter of making it completely clear to the utility companies what we need. And I'm sure we're doing it already. Section 106 projects, we're collecting about 5,000 per dwelling on Section 106. And it's so fragmented and so difficult and split so many different ways, we never seem to get a decent chunk of money together for any of our major things. And then lastly, the community infrastructure levy projects, doing that, that'll enable us to address the backlog, which you can't do under Section 106. And, you know, this piece of work will be an absolute foundation stone for that. For starting on a community infrastructure levy. So can I urge that we take this needs to go a further step before we get to our local plan. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Karen, do you want to answer that point, or do you want to, when you present the Royal Sandra, answer those points?
Yeah, this is obviously the first two stages of a ultimately four-stage report. So, but we can certainly feedback those comments to the consultants so that when they're presenting the next stage of the report and the infrastructure delivery plan element as an alternative way of providing the information to make it perhaps easier to access. We can feed that back and take that up with the consultants, but obviously this is only part of the picture, as you've alluded to yourself. So more will come out as we get further on with the local plan.
You have another minute, William, if you wish to use it.
I won't use it, but when you feed back to them, can you use the word benchmarking against other areas? We haven't got any of that at the moment. And funding and something we can use for really shaping our message and lobbying and pushing to get this done. Because if we don't do it, we'll just become a dump here.
Thank you, Councillor Sunnex. Okay, I will now ask, thank you very much. I'll ask Karen to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a similar report to the authority monitoring report in that it's something we're required to publish every year. And this covers the period from 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 24. During that period, Section 106 agreements were signed, which secured about £4.4 million in contributions. In that same period, we actually received just under £3 million in Section 106 contributions. We spent 1.6 million on a variety of projects and allocated a further 2.2 million to other projects such as the Castle Park and Stanway Country Park, which are longer term projects. We're in receipt of just over £8 million. Last year, 222 affordable homes were built and new agreements were signed to secure a further 81 affordable homes to be built in the future. Further details under each of these categories is available in the infrastructure funding statement itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, thank you. Report's really comprehensive, and this is possibly my lack of knowledge. One, am I right in thinking that generally Section 106 can only be spent in the ward where the development occurs? And two, where we transfer Section 106 money to another agency, so for example, the funds, 34,000 was transferred to the NHS to increase the capacity at the Tiptree Medical Centre. How do we track and monitor that they actually use the money for that? Thank you.
Good question. Karen?
Sorry, I was scribbling and I missed the middle question there. That was... Oh, right, okay, sorry. So the first one was about spending the ward, and that basically you can only seek Section 106 contribution where it is necessary to mitigate the development. So that normally means spending the ward, but that's not always the case for a number of reasons. Sometimes, I mentioned Castle Park, for example, Leisure World. Leisure World provides the only publicly available swimming pool in the whole city area, so it's only right that you know, you may want to put some money towards things like that are strategic projects. But predominantly it is in the same area to mitigate the development. And then when money is passed to others to spend, we do have a monitoring officer, but it's more us monitoring developers to make sure that they pay us, I've got to say. And they monitor us to make sure the spend is appropriate and in time. So I think it would be them seeking their money back if it wasn't spent in accordance with the Section 106 agreement. And that has happened in the past, fortunately, not in Colchester for a long time. But they can request payback.
Tracking the NHS is something that we do that way. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Councillor Parsons?
Thank you. 2 questions, please. First of all, do we have a date for when the water cycle study will be available, please?
Ask both questions and then Karen will answer both.
Okay, second one, and it's more of a comment. Picking up on what Councillor Sunnox has just said, it is really important that we start to put some figures on some of these things, and particularly where the money's coming from, because developer contributions can only pay for, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can only pay for the implications of the new development, whereas we've got some very significant infrastructure deficits currently that cannot be met from developer contribution. So it's really important that as we go forward, this report actually addresses where that money can come from.
Karen?
I think both the question and the comment relate to items in the next report. I think the walking and cycling and the infrastructure study figures are about items of infrastructure related to the local plan, rather than the report on Section 106.
Section 5.72, sorry, 5.71, 5.72. 5.71 lists the reports that have already been done. 5.72, in addition, reports including sustainability appraisal, habitat regulations, infrastructure delivery plan, viability will be published.
That's the next report, I think.
Yeah. Am I looking at the wrong page? Yeah. Oh, my apologies.
Okay. So
I'm skipping ahead. There are too many pages here.
Yeah, absolutely. Any further questions or comments on this report? It's just for Councillor Barber.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarity on Section 106 contributions. I sometimes get asked to sign off Section 106 projects in my ward, but not always. Could you clarify the process around that? Because I've never quite understood, and I've probably been here longer than most now on the council. So if you just clarify how that actually works, thanks.
Not as long as some.
Not as long as you.
Not as long as me either, Lewis. Yeah, there's no ward councillor sign-off. Somehow this process was introduced on a somewhat ad hoc basis, it would appear. So what we do now is front load the councillor involvement at the start of the process, so that you inform us if you've got projects that you want to see funded, so that we can then add them to the list and secure their delivery wherever possible. I know some of the teams will consult the parish councils and ward councillors. I had a meeting with ward councillors in one ward today to discuss various projects. So that does happen as well. It's that the portfolio holder for planning signs off anything over £250,000, I think. But that's the only member involvement in the sign-off process, because in theory, everything should be detailed in the Section 106 report. So it should actually say the project it will be spent on.
Lewis, do you want to briefly come back?
Yeah, just to touch on the engagement point, I think that's worked really well. I know the feedback from parish areas I represent has been very good on that, and I think it's been welcomed, that front-loading point, rather than us reacting after a lot of work has already been done. So,
thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Can we note that, Councillor Lakia, can you hear me?
I haven't got a voice.
Too much carol singing.
Yes. So our members made aware of what opportunities are there in regards to Section 106, and who decides what happens?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities for member involvement sort of up front, because you'll probably know more what's happening in your wards than we do. and what's going to be required in your wards. Then when planning applications come in, there's an opportunity to feed into the process at that stage as well.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Julie Young and I have had that opportunity in the past, and if we get another major application on, I'm sure the three of us will be talking to Karen and her colleagues about it. Information only, can we note that report? Is that agreed? Out of compiling it and putting it together. And thank you to the members who have had about a week to digest as much of it as they possibly could. Thank you for your efforts. And we said at the briefing, it would take about 30 hours to read it all. And I know that that's almost impossible. It is impossible unless you've got 30 hours, which I know most of us haven't. But I know all of you will have looked at it, will have skim read it, will have read the executive summaries at least. It is for information only, of course. It is about evidence, but I'm sure you'll have taken note of everything that the officers have put before us tonight. Before we get into any debate on it, I'm going to ask, we've got two visiting councillors wishing to speak on this, starting with Councillor Harris. Dave, you have up to 5 minutes.
Sir, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And can I use just a few seconds? I won't take the 5 minutes. You will be relieved to know. And I wish you and your team of officers and panel members a very season's greetings and happy Christmas to you. I was out the front of the building earlier on, and a lot of people will have heard the what do we want for Christmas? We want to say Middlewick. You will know that was the chant at the front of the building. Of course, we all want that, but I'm not going to revisit what was already debated, Mr. Chair, last time, and I thank the officers for that, because I think there was comments earlier on about what the process is for review. It's very much detailed there, and we've been there, done that, and we're now in that process, and I look forward to the next few months when you do your work, sir, which you obviously will. On to the news in the Gazette this week that Natural England are going to offer to work with the City Council, which I very much welcome. I think that will be an advantage for officers and for them and for the public who want to see the right thing done here. We want to make sure that the Middlewick is protected. Throwing it out of the local plan is one thing. We need to put it back in there with protection over it to make sure that it's cast iron and looked after. I think the indications are good, because with people, illustrious people like Natural England on our side working with us in the right way. That was my first question. How will that be constituted? How will that be worked? Will it be sort of regular meetings, updates and handing glove meetings along the way? I look forward to your meetings in February, Mr. Chairman, and the committee, because I think that the process that was outlined last time is very clear to me. We know where we're going. We've got a timeline. They're not going to get saved Middlewick for Christmas, but it may well be in 2025 at some times. But for me, just thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the work that you're doing. I welcome item 9 in its entirety, and it's a long read. I know that. I spent 2 or 3 hours looking at it myself in some speed reading detail. But that was my question really, about how the Natural England relationship will be managed. I welcome them and thank them for the offer to work with you, Mr. Chairman, and your team. And I just hope that you can give us an answer to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Sandra?
Yeah, thank you. I think in the first instance, we will be taking Natural England up on their offer in reviewing the independent ecological evidence, and I think and receive their response. And I think that the details of how that collaborative working will sort of go forward, I think is something we need to consider further with Natural England. But in the first stage of that will be for them to review the evidence, which we welcome with open arms their offer to do that.
Dave, you have another minute if you want to use it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that answer. The answer, I suppose, in response to that is, but how are we going to count the houses we are building in Colchester over the municipal year, I guess, and how we're going to measure ourselves against that in future years to make sure that we put back in what we take out to make sure that we've got a valid local plan, because we all know the housing needs there, don't we?
Sandra?
I think that's the local plan review. I think that's looking at, that's next year's considerations as the process of consulting on the plan, considering receiving and considering the rest of the evidence and the process going forward, and with Middlewick part of that consideration, along with the whole of the city area and meeting our needs that we need to do.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Councillor Martin Warnes, please. Martin, you have up to 5 minutes. And your time will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair, and I echo my ward colleagues' comments and wish you all a very Merry Christmas. I don't expect you to say ho, ho, ho back, okay? So I want to take a broad brush and raise 3 issues. One is obviously Middlewick, as you'd expect me to, as one of the neighbouring local members. The other is better use of Colchester Town Station. And the other is for a clear vision and strategy to better integrate existing community facilities towards resident population needs in Beerchurch in particular. So starting on the last, Beerchurch doesn't have a dedicated community centre in the way that many of your wards will have. It has a hodgepodge of church halls and community facilities. There's a community room in the ownership of this council, which is underused. There are church halls where quite naturally the first call goes to the needs of the church. So I would welcome officers working more closely with myself and my 2 ward colleagues to see what's possible within this review, to see that the community facility in Beerchurch are matching the known and understood needs of the population that live there. Moving on to Colchester Town Station. Colchester, as we know, is growing and has been growing for some time and is expected to grow. And we have declared a climate change emergency, and we want to put less pollution into the air. And yet, it's common for people on the south side of the town and beyond to make their way up to Colchester main station, formerly known as Colchester North. And once you get outside the very peak hours, i.e. the commute, your services drop off, and you can only go direct down to Liverpool Street once an hour, or you have to go up to Wivenhoe and come back. And after a certain time of night, you can't get back. So if you come back late at night, you have to walk from the North Station. And if you parked on the south side, places like Napier Road, you would have to walk all the way there. And on Sundays, you can't get a connection round. Now, that strikes me that we could open strategic conversations with Network Rail and the train companies to see whether the Colchester Town Station can be enhanced and better serve the south side of Colchester. I raised a long while ago, when we were talking about the West Tay, that there ought to be a possibility to run some kind of rail car from the proposed garden community round to sort of Colchester town on a kind of shuttle. That would be cheaper than moving the whole rail station. You could have put a spur in. And I didn't feel I ever got any traction. So I'm asking that we think outside the box and that we think, how can we enhance Colchester town as a main station for the whole south side of the town. And then we returned back to Middlewick. And I just want to just simply say that a core principle of the National Planning Policy Framework is that planning should contribute to conserve and enhance the natural environment. And paragraph 179 in particular specifically states that, that development should contribute to and enhance the natural environment and minimise impacts on biodiversity with appropriate ecological surveys. We know they're coming, but they're not here yet, and so we are still waiting. We know the weight of evidence from various ecological interests, helped by professionals from organisations, is clearly showing concerns. And our policy EV11 seeks to conserve and enhance the biodiversity of the city and sets a requirement for development to achieve biodiversity net gain. And where appropriate, developments that have adverse effects on the integrity of habitat sites will not be supported. And I wanted to just bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. Just on rail, in the white paper today, apparently there is power being given to mayors to intervene in the rail network if they think the strategic transport would benefit in the area. That if we get a mayor, then that might be something that they could take up. Sandra, do you want to address this? Or Karen, the other points?
Yeah, thank you. It's certainly in terms of the town station, something we can mention to the sustainable transport team to look into, Martin, given the particular concerns there. Noted what you said about Middlewick as well. And then in terms of community facilities in Beerchurch, again, we can ask the community development team to get in touch with you, and also through planning, if there is new development in Beerchurch, then we can look to feed your concerns in to that process.
Thank you. Martin, you have another minute if you wish to use it.
Yeah, very quickly. Could Karen confirm that she is aware of a number of requests that have come from the Beerchurch councillors in terms of infrastructure needs? I myself have submitted some to you, and you might wish to avail the committee. There's various criteria that has to be met for those requests to be accepted. Thank you.
Karen?
Yes, I think Martin has provided me with a list, and unfortunately some of the projects on the list weren't acceptable in planning terms to be funded through section 106 because there's 3 statutory tests. So any funding for money from development must be for a project that's first of all necessary to make the application acceptable. It must be related in scale and kind to the development, and I've forgotten the third one, and I've got the MPPF open. I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Okay, thank you for your contributions. I'm now going to ask Sandra to present the report.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll do my best to keep it fairly brief, a report of almost 1,300 pages. So it's appreciated that this report and the accompanying appendices are very lengthy and require significant time to read and understand them in detail. It's important to remember these comprise part of the evidence base for the local plan. They are technical reports presenting factual evidence. The longer reports all include summaries. We're seeking to publish these now to provide as much lead-in time as possible to the consideration of the draft local plan in February next year. The report provides a headline summary from each of the evidence documents to be published, and I'll highlight a few of them briefly now. Starting with the local housing needs assessment, the key points are summarised in the report at paragraphs 5.5 to 5.11, and the full report is Appendix A at page 87 of the agenda. The assessment considers the overall need for housing throughout Colchester up to 2041, as well as the need for different types of homes and the needs of different groups within the community. Appendix 1 to the housing needs assessment includes an update in the light of the revised standard method, now confirmed by government as set out in the announcement last week. For Colchester, the need is now 1,300 homes per annum, a slight increase on the 1,290 which was calculated at the time of consultation of the MPPF and standard method changes, and the appendix is based on which the appendix is based on. It includes an assessment of the current and future housing needs in terms of size, type and tenure for market and affordable housing, and this will inform the mix and tenure split in the local plan policies. Next, the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment. Amongst the range of specialist housing needs that we need to plan for includes Gypsy and Traveller and show people accommodation. This has been subject to a specialist report as part of an Essex-wide partnership through the Essex Planning Officers Association. The key points on this are set out in the committee report at paragraphs 512 to 519, and the full report is Appendix B, starting on page 303. The assessment identifies there's an overall need of 15 pitches to 2041. And I can say that's considerably lower than many other areas of Essex in their equivalent reports they've recently had undertaken. Turning now to the infrastructure audit and delivery plan, the stage 1 and 2 report, which is the infrastructure audit. The key points are summarised in the report at paragraphs 520 to 526, and the full report is Appendix 6, starting on page 371. The purpose of the infrastructure audit and delivery plan is to identify the infrastructure which is required to meet the growth anticipated in Colchester over the local plan period up to 2041, along with the associated costs, timing and delivery arrangements for that infrastructure. The delivery plan will, the infrastructure audit delivery plan will form part of the evidence base to support the local plan review. The stage 1 and 2 report is now ready to be published. This initial stage has involved desktop research to understand the context for infrastructure provision in Colchester, covering 37 types of infrastructure, including a review of planning policy framework and information on the planned baseline position, and investment, future demand and supply gaps. Stakeholder engagement and consideration of high-level spatial options has also been undertaken with all infrastructure providers to inform the stage 1 and 2 report. The report sets the baseline for testing the adequacy of infrastructure to support planned growth, which will be considered as part of the next stage of work, which will inform the infrastructure delivery plan, setting out mitigation requirements, timing and cost implications to support growth as proposed in the preferred options draft local plan. Retail, leisure and town centre study. This study provides a review of the national trends and in the retail and commercial leisure sectors and the potential implications the trends have for Colchester's main centres. Key points on this are set out in the committee report, paragraphs 527 to 533, and the full report is Appendix D, starting on page 659. All Colchester's centres, regardless of scale, need to be more multi-purpose in their offer, use and experience. The study provides a steer for informing local plan policies, identifying the importance of considering how appropriate change can be supported and managed within the centres to ensure their future viability and function. Updated health checks for Colchester City Centre, Wivenhoe, Tiptree and West Mersey have been carried out, and these are included in the report. The evidence finds that there is no need to provide any further allocations for comparison or convenience floor space in Colchester up to 2041. And guidance on informing local plan policies is provided, including support for a reduced threshold in size of floor space when an impact assessment would be required. Landscape character assessment review. The key points of this are set out in the report at paragraphs 534 to 541, and the full report is Appendix E, starting on page 903. This study updates the Colchester Landscape Character Assessment, which was undertaken in 2005. The Landscape Character Assessment Review creates a comprehensive and up-to-date strategic scale landscape evidence base to underpin the new local plan and assist in the planning process. It can be used to consider landscape character when considering any type of change. This includes opportunities for conserving existing character and strengthening and enhancing character, as well as opportunities to create new character. As well as informing the local plan, it will also provide an updated baseline to inform development management. And Strategic Land Availability Assessment Report, the Stage 1 report. The key points on this are in the committee report, paragraphs 5.42 to 5.53, and the full report is Appendix F, starting on page 1009. Sorry, 1309. The Strategic Land Availability Assessment Stage 1 report provides a comprehensive overview of the sites that have been assessed in accordance with the methodology that this committee agreed last year, or probably a year ago, and sets out the outcome of the assessments at Stage 1. This includes 7 criteria that assess whether or not a site is suitable for development and whether or not they should proceed to the next stage of assessment. Of the total sites assessed, approximately 72% were assessed as being suitable in principle to proceed to the next stage. A total of 68 sites have been deemed unsuitable and have therefore been omitted from further assessment. Appendix 1 to the Stage 1 report sets out the sites which list the names of the sites and their reference number that have progressed to the next stage, and Appendix 2 sets out those that have been omitted and an indication of the reason why. The remainder of the report provides a brief update on the other evidence work which is underway, all of which will be available to support the draft preferred options local plan. This includes some key significant important evidence, including transport evidence, just as one example. These will all be published as they are completed to enable as much advanced reading as possible ahead of the consideration of the draft plan, preferred options plan in February. And finally, the ecological evidence Midwick's already been referred to this evening, and it's anticipated that we will be able to publish that later this week. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing that with Natural England for their review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra, and magnificent that you could encapsulate all that into 5 minutes. It's really good. And again, just thank you to the officers. This is evidence-based, this is evidence, this is for information only. So most of the questions, I guess, will be around clarification, but there may well be a few. I've got Councillor Barber, then Councillor Smalls, then Councillor Dundas to start with.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sandra, as well as the wider planning team for this piece of work. I want to primarily limit my comments for the time being on the infrastructure audit, because that is something that a lot of us have been asking for a considerable amount of time, and you've quite clearly delivered on that this evening, in my view, producing the piece of work you have. It lays bare the challenges we already have, and then obviously we've got the upcoming increase in houses being introduced, and also the effectively liberalisation of planning, rightfully or wrongfully, into local government. The interesting point of view is obviously we've had the announcement as well today on devolution and local government reform, but irrespective, this is clearly going to be a piece of work that's going to be useful for whatever comes next for Colchester and Essex in local government. I do just want to focus my comments in on the water and sewage piece of work, because that is something that I feel is not always discussed to the extent that it should be by councillors, because we focus often, in large extent, rightfully, on roads, the NHS, etc. But I've seen firsthand in areas such as Langham, Dedham, Boxted, the pressure that's now on our water and sewage system in those areas where we have houses literally being flooded with sewage and water when there's periods of high rainfall, and that's let alone without additional housing growth. So I guess my comment around the sewage and water situation is this likely to affect our thinking on some of the preferred sites? Because from the discussions I've had and listened to, areas such as Langham and the old West Tay area are an area of interest, should I put, for the council as part of strategic growth. And my concerns are that quite simply here, irrespective of all the other challenges we have, the water and sewage capability is just simply insufficient to take any level of considerable growth. And the West Tay, Marks Tay development is referenced in there. So has this opened up thinking around those areas of strategic growth that I know are being thought of, to basically say that this is not going to work at this early stage? That's what I'm very concerned about. Thanks.
Thank you, Lewis. Sandra?
Okay, yeah, it's certainly something that the evidence needs to test fully and understand the implications. The infrastructure audit work is only, as you know, is only one part of a much wider evidence base, and the water and sewage element will be looked at in far more detail through the water cycle study. The sort of initial sort of capacity information that's provided in the audit in relation to water treatment plants and so on is sort of just a statement as a point in time in terms of a matter of fact of the capacity situation. The water cycle study will need to look at what growth options are being proposed and be very clear about what the challenges are, what the suitability of those are, and what the solutions are if there are existing problems with the capacity. And it will make the water cycle study will also make recommendations and be very clear about whether any locations for growth are suitable or not, and we will obviously need to reflect on that in the evidence in confirming the final plan or the recommended plan.
Thanks, Sandra, for just, I guess, picking up, that's really helpful, thank you. Just picking up more widely on the impact of the incoming MPPF on matters such as this. For the housing numbers, if I understand correctly, infrastructure deficit in the upcoming plans isn't sufficient grounds to vary our housing numbers. So the government has made clear that irrespective of these challenges, we're not going to be able to say we can't take the housing numbers. We're effectively being told we have to find a way to find the capacity in the system to deliver them, even if all these areas were red, basically, on the water assessment.
That's my understanding too, yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Thank you, Lewis. Councillor Smalls, Faye, please.
Briefly, with the Middlewick report that's expected this week, I just wanted to clarify will the public have access to it at the same time as the councillors? And I'll just say, as a ward councillor, it would be my preference that everybody gets it as close together as possible. Obviously, you know, some people are going to get it before others, but my preference would be for it to be available just for transparency and to sort of help relations.
Faye, Sandra?
I anticipate it's going to be, because of the nature of the report, it will probably be quite a large size of document. So by far the easiest way to share it is through a link, and the easiest way to do that is by publishing on the website. So in that case, it would be, I agree, and it would be easier for it to be shared and available to everybody at the same time.
No, that would be perfect. Then people who with a specific interest, I can just point them to the link. I wasn't expecting it all to be in the chat necessarily.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dundas, Councillor Parsons, and then Councillor Smithson.
Thank you. I won't go through all 1,267 pages, but thank you very much for the presentation. Just a few comments, really. I mean, obviously, I recognise that this is a starting point. It's a list which we then develop, a required list of items needed within the district to deliver our housing requirements. But I think Councillor Sunnock's made a good point that Once we've got that list, we've got three fundamental ways of delivering them, either through government intervention or investment, through SIL, which is new, which we haven't had before, and through developer contributions via Section 106. So I think probably some sort of indication where we think each one is going to come from would be a very good starting point. That said, I mean, within the infrastructure audit, talking about that first, that there are some very common themes actually, and particularly if we look through where they list the challenges around the different spatial options. And there's a very consistent one on the A12 and A120. That comes through as a challenge in pretty much every single option. To pick out some words, large-scale investment of the A120 to support Marks Tay. For major investment at Marks Tay requires large-scale government investment. Page 641, growth around Marks Tay and Tiptree would require A12 and A120 investment. You can pick it up on pretty much every single page. So I think it's very, very clear there to support this plan, we are going to need something on the A12 and A120. The other common theme actually is around electricity. On a number of the spatial options, it points out the difficulty with the development outside the urban areas, that we have 8 primary stations nearing capacity. And the first one is probably in Marks Tay and Layer, which also affects Tiptree. Again, the words points towards urban development occurs on a number of occasions. And wastewater, it points out that wastewater is a big challenge at Marks Tay and Copford. So again, I can see lots of challenges coming with the words Marks Tay, which the infrastructure audit has picked up. One interesting one is on the environmental-led spatial policy. It says it points towards mass development in South Colchester, which is quite interesting when some of the environmental issues we've had there, and I'm not quite sure how that's very sustainable, but bearing in mind the transport difficulties there, but there we go. The next document, the retail and leisure, you probably get different views. I'm not too sure about the comment on page 669. Within Colchester, Chelmsford is colloquially referred to as the capital of Essex. I don't know if you'd want to ask that in some parts of Colchester every day, but there we go. But I think what it does drive home actually is however much we try to put things in the right places, we live in a retail market and people do not use what is on their doorstep. They go where they want to go and what they like. So just to pick up a couple of examples, the use of Braintree and Ipswich cinemas from the Colchester area is immense, particularly the Braintree one, but a lot go to Ipswich. From the Tiptree area, more people use leisure facilities in Houston and Braintree than use Leisure World. Now that might say a thing about Leisure World's marketing, but that's quite a fascinating statistic. So yeah, we can plan as much as we like, but just because something's on their doorstep, you think, well, actually we put it there, they'll walk to it, it's great. But if it's not very good and there's a better one 20 miles away, they'll drive to the better one 20 miles away. And that really, really comes through in this retail and leisure study. The landscape assessment, it's a huge document. It's really quite fascinating. There's actually even history about there of the Roman invasion if you look for it. But I'm not going to go through it all. But it's worth a second read, I think, if anybody gets time. But yeah, infrastructure audit, it's very clear which way we're heading. I'm not going to mention medical and doctors because somebody else will, but A12, A120 are essential. We have big problems around electricity provision and we have big problems around wastewater provision, and somehow we're going to have to find a way through those if we're going to stand any chance of delivering this plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Sandra?
I'm not sure there are actually any questions in there, so I think we note all of those observations. Thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you, and very good observations they are too. Yeah, they all obviously those points all need to be addressed if we are going to deliver this plan. You're absolutely right. Councillor Parsons, please, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got questions around two themes. One is the infrastructure, particularly on the water, and the other is on some of the methodology on the housing, particularly as it relates to rural areas. So On the infrastructure, I'll repeat the question about when we might get the water cycle study. You did give a commitment last meeting, I know, that we would have it before the housing allocations happened, but it'd be good to know when we're expecting that. On page 582, we've got a statement that by 2050 in water will have 38% less water to supply customers with. I am aware, looking at the chair, who's very up on these things, that the present government in their manifesto promised new reservoirs, which is probably one of the best things in their manifesto. We are the area of the country, Essex is, that's got the least rainfall, and yet we've also got significant population growth. Has there been any discussion with the government? I appreciate that the changes to planning they're proposing will basically take those sorts of infrastructure completely out of our hands, but it would be helpful to know if they're even vaguely thinking about a reservoir in our area, because obviously we don't want to put housing allocations where they're planning a reservoir. Secondly, on page 592, where we've got a rating of spare sewage capacity, can I ask you to go back to them on West Mersey? Because I think what has happened is Anglian Water in April promised an upgrade to West Mersey sewage station, and it's not happened. As Councillor Powling mentioned at the last full council meeting, at the moment we've got 3 or 4 tankers every day collecting sewage from there to process it elsewhere. I've also got people in East Mersey who, during the summer months, when we've got an extra few thousand people because we've got 3 holiday parks there, which needs to be taken account of, they literally can't sit in their back garden because sewage is backing up the pipes and the smell is so horrendous. One gentleman I know has spent thousands of pounds trying to seal the pipes in there to no avail. And finally, on the infrastructure, page 599, it seems to be set in the 1953 floods as a bit of a baseline. Could I suggest that what needs to be in there as well is that we have actually seen a 20 centimetre rise in sea level since 1953. And locally, we've also got a sinking of the land due to isostatic adjustment of 0.8 millimetres a year, which has another 5 centimetres decline in rise in relative sea level, which means that what was a 100-year flood becomes a 1 in 10-year flood, which seems to be quite important there. Do you want to respond to that before I go on to the housing ones?
Yeah, thanks, son.
Okay, I can certainly take those points up with the consultants. They've, in terms of the flooding data, I think they will have followed they've followed the guidance and the sort of methodology and the factors that are that apply to looking at flood zones and projected flooding. Water cycle study, I'll again commit that it will be available before the plan is available and we confirm allocations, but I can't give you a precise date at this point in time, and I'm not aware of any conversation specifically about a new reservoir, but that was about government and Anglian Water, wasn't it? So yeah.
If it was in the Labour manifesto, then it'll happen. Could I go on to the housing? Yes, please, Chair? Martin. Yeah. And I think the reservoirs might be one of those rare points where the Chair and I actually agree on something. Just one other thing that is related to housing. The gas infrastructure does not mention anywhere that we've got whole villages that are not on the gas main. That would seem to me to be quite significant when we're looking at capacity issues. One of the things that, reading through the housing needs assessment, there seems to be
and homogenisation. And it may be that I represent an incredibly unusual ward in Mersey and Pyfleet, but I suspect some of these issues apply to other wards, particularly rural ones as well. Page 148, we've got, 146 to 148, we've got in Tiptree that a certain number of people are moving in from London. Mersey doesn't say where they're moving in from. My gut feeling would be probably 2/3 are moving in as retirees from London. And more specifically, question on page 178, which is where we've got a methodology of using, to assess, if I could quote section 6.14, to assess affordability, two different measures are used. Firstly, to consider what income levels are likely to be needed to assess private rented housing. And secondly, to consider what income level is needed to assess owner occupation. Now, using that methodology, Mersey sorry, I'm getting very tongue-tied here. Mersey is listed as having a slightly below average income, which suggests on using that methodology that actually people can't afford houses. Now, there is an issue of people not being able to afford houses, but what has skewed that is the fact that Mersey and Pyfleet ward has got one of the highest proportions in the UK of people aged 65 plus. It's got 34% compared to the UK average of about 18.5%. So the income is low because a significant proportion of those people are on pensions, but at the same time, there are very few people aged 65 plus that are looking to become first-time buyers. So there would seem to be a problem with the methodology there, and I wonder if that methodology problem does actually play out in some other wards, particularly rural wards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Sandra, I'm going to allow you to answer Councillor Parsons' points and then we'll take the break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn your microphone off, Martin.
Sorry.
Well, I'm not an expert on the methodology of affordability, I have to say, but I think it's a methodology that's applied for carrying out studies like this, and it provides a comparative set of data. No, I take your point around certain factors may well be skewing what it's showing, but there may be other factors that are skewing it for other elements. But it's to give a broad indication, sort of based on the methodology that is set out and under guidance to follow in order to arrive at this understanding. I don't know if Karen's got anything else to add. She may have more to say on that point. And just on the question around Mersey and not sort of indicating where people have moved from, I think that information was based on input that was carried out from surveys from agents, and if it wasn't provided, then they couldn't indicate it, and maybe they had a different level of input at the time when they carried out interviews and telephone conversations to feed into that, but it's only as good as the information that was provided to them at the time of doing it.
Thank you, Sandra. Karen, do you want to make the other point that you want to make?
Yes, sorry. It was just about the planning committee and proposed or possible changes to how planning committees run. I've actually established it's not a formal consultation. It's a policy paper to inform discussion, I think it says. So there are 4 questions. So if members feel strongly, then we can look. It's informed discussion with the sector to determine whether and how to take these proposals forward. Like I say, I don't think for an authority like Colchester it's going to make very much difference at all, because we have a scheme of delegation which is good and probably held as best practice. Certainly the authorities I go to doing peer challenges, then the sort of delegation we have is put forward to them. So if members feel strongly, then we can respond to it. But if not, then I suggest we don't.
I think that probably needs to go to all members.
Yeah.
So that everybody has the opportunity to see if we should respond or not. So we can get that round to all members, Karen. After the break, I've already got Councillor Smithson, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Laki Akinyemi. Are there anybody at this stage who thinks they might want to speak? Councillor Barber may want to come in again. I won't, if you don't say now, I won't hold you to it, but we'll see how the debate goes. So we'll have a 5-minute break and then come back at 19:36, please, to carry on the debate. Thank you. Colleagues, if you're outside, we're going to restart the meeting. Thank you. Give it up. Give up the caffeine. Okay, who are we waiting for? And Martin Parsons.
I think he's had the coffee.
You're on next, Reese.
Well, I'm just thinking what Councillor Parsons is out. Crack on through the rest.
No.
No, he's had his say.
No, he's had it. The Vice Chair and I agreed. He's had his turn.
This is good.
Karen, did you see Councillor Parsons about?
Yes, there was a very long queue for the vending machine and it's the slowest vending machine.
Not just me commenting on the vending machines, you see.
If only there was some special marketing money for us.
These are the Texas Cup, which is the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've had 8 minutes due to Councillor Parsons has just come back in the room.
Slowness of the vending machine.
Well, bad workers always blame the tools, don't they? Okay, let's move on immediately on with the debate, and it's Councillor Smithson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Officers, thank you so much. This report is absolutely amazing. And if you're interested, I will provide comments on all 1,342 pages because I could easily sit there and do that. I had a couple of clarifications. On page 93, there's mention of 21,400 additional jobs in the borough or city. I'm curious where that number came from and if we're talking about jobs relating to the construction of the new dwellings or that's across the life of the plan, etc. I think there could be some more clarification there. And then in the section immediately below about affordable housing need, it says, when looking at needs from households unable to buy or rent, the analysis suggests a need for 877 affordable homes per annum across the city. And what I'm curious about is that an additional 877 per annum, or is that 877 including the current stock? Because if it's an additional 877, 67% of our total housing needs for the next 5 years needs to be affordable. And I don't think that's what developers have necessarily got in mind. And then finally, because Paul's already stolen some of my comments about substations, the table at the top of page 95 for me is probably the most important table in the in this report, where it talks about the needs for market housing, affordable housing by bedroom numbers, etc. How do we ensure that that need is reflected in the developments that come forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Reece. Sandra?
So the first one about jobs, I think what this exercise is doing is looking at the sort of calculation of aligning population projection to the number of jobs that growth in population could support. as a sort of crude calculation, and that's what that figure equates to. There will be an employment land needs assessment as part of the study, which may drill down into more detail and certainly into the types of jobs and so on that the plan needs to plan for, and scenarios and so on. Affordable housing, additional need, yes, this is about looking at future needs, and I think it's recognised that, again, it's based on assessing all the various population and affordability factors that are all sort of itemised in detail in the report as to what that affordable housing equates to. It's recognised that it would never be possible for all of that to be delivered through a proportion of development, of all housing delivered, but it does point towards trying to secure the maximum that possibly can going forward, because the need is as acute as it is. And your final point, securing the right mix. The policy and local plan will be drawn from this evidence to identify what the mix, the needs, and the housing type needs to be, and there'll also be a requirement for proposals to be put forward that take into account the latest evidence and the need. And obviously there's conversations around viability with planning applications, but the starting point will always be the policy, and it will be drawn from the most up-to-date evidence that we have, which obviously in the local plan will be based on this when it's adopted.
Thank you. I mean, you can see quite clearly the diametrically opposed housing needs requirement and developers' intentions. We've got a severe challenge. What worries me as well is that affordable homes need number is woefully below what it actually is. I know from my hat with CBH that we're putting people into housing association houses which are, quote, affordable, and they are most certainly not affordable for people. So that need is just going to keep growing exponentially. I think we've got a real challenge there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhys. Councillor Kelly, Sean.
Thank you. This is an observation that's going to become a question, but I don't know exactly what form the question is going to take until I've made the observation. So, in the dwellings delivered table that we've got, where for 23-24, it shows how we hit the 1,098 total. I noticed that a huge number of the houses came from the university. It's like it's probably more than half of them, or exactly half of them. And I'm interested to know whether, if the university, obviously we can't make them do anything, if they had decided not to do that, if they had decided not to go ahead and do whatever they were doing, would we have massively missed that target? And the type of dwellings that they were making, I'm presuming, were student accommodation. I wouldn't consider those to be actually houses necessarily. So if that's the case, how come that can get included in this number? And it looks like that as an authority who's effectively held to account by central government to deliver on these numbers, that we were to some extent held to ransom on in this occasion by the university, because effectively if they didn't do it, we'd have missed this number massively. So there was probably a question in there somewhere, but also is this a loophole of some description, effectively, that student accommodation counts as a dwelling? Because I don't see them as actual houses in the context that we've been talking about.
I think those of us who've been around a while will know the answer to this, but for a newer member, it is interesting. So yes, Karen, explain.
Thank you. Yes, we would have missed the target, yes, without those the large development at the university. And they are student flats, student accommodation, but we're not allowed to apply a one dwelling, one student unit equating to one dwelling. So it's, I think for us, it's 2.4, for every 2.46 student units, you can count one dwelling completion. So there was about 1,200 up at the university, I think, so we were allowed to count 500 or something like that from memory. So yeah, it recognises that it's not a like-for-like build.
But it also, you're absolutely right, we would have missed the target by quite, even with that, we would have missed the target by quite, but for the university building that accommodation. Is that okay? Councillor Akinyemi, please. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. I've written down my questions. Please.
I was with Elizabeth at 2 carol service yesterday and she was singing heartily, so it's probably, and reading. Okay, these are Elizabeth's questions. What are the long-term plans for ensuring that the new housing developments remain affordable and accessible to future generations? How will the council address potential challenges relating to the integration of new residents into existing communities, local residents choosing services further away over ones close by? And how do we ensure transportation linking new development to employment hubs are fit for purpose so that Colchester can benefit from the skills and talents of our residents? Sandra or Karen, who's going first?
I'll make a start in terms of, first of all, retaining affordable homes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they're all good questions. The first one is there are plans to reform the Right to Buy Act. So I think there might have already been some changes in terms of the percentages, but I think that's to be rolled out even further. So I don't know whether Reece knows more about that from his CBH involvement or not. If not, I can circulate something on that to all members after the meeting, because it's definitely been recognised as an issue, and this committee in the past have raised it cross-party, the concerns about right to buy, and I think almshouses have been the only ones that have been exempt in recent years. Challenges relating to the integration of new residents. Yeah, it is very difficult to do that. I know in Mile End, when there was a period of significant growth, they had a community officer based there for a couple of years. That seemed to work well from what I knew of it. And I don't know offhand how that was funded or anything like that, but it seemed to be a good way of trying to achieve that integration. And then the transport point, again, is a really good one, because you think about the employment sites that we've got, and you probably have to get a bus into Colchester and then out to somewhere else, don't you, rather than having a good linked up system. But maybe that's something which, if we become a mayoral authority, we can take better control of, in terms of that, the public transport piece. There's certainly changes. I think Manchester, the B line, I think it is, and then there's, somewhere else was mentioned as well. But there's definitely examples of where it's worked a lot better than others, so we can just try and learn from that.
Thank you for those questions, Elizabeth. We're back to Councillor Barber. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just on the University of Essex development, that build-out rate seems extraordinary in a year. Is it more that they were opened at one point for a new academic year? Because otherwise that would be an astonishing level of development in 1 year to just bring on stream. That's more just a small point. My wider point was on digital infrastructure, I guess, best way of putting it, and our capacity in Colchester, because it always feels like when I'm in the town centre, where I work most of the time, that actually this is one of the areas where we struggle with internet signal on phone through data, and whether that's a capacity challenge in areas of higher population, where there's a lot of people working, socialising, living, and then also on the flip side, in terms of rural areas where we may not have the infrastructure yet in place at all, let alone just general capacity. I've long thought it might be worthwhile us considering a sort of site allocation on broadband infrastructure for 5G. That's not broadband, is it? Mobile data, sorry, infrastructure such as 5G, because one of the challenges we have, and I know Essex County Council identified this, is that the sites come forward, there's great kick-off, and then they just don't go ahead. So we lose that infrastructure, and whether there is alternatives often put forward, but the sort of network operator, Reese, is that the correct phrase, puts forward the infrastructure, aren't willing to listen to that. But if we maybe put forward sites where the landowner has consent, we might get further forward with it. And I'd like to see us really focusing on improving that infrastructure. In a sense, related, but not really that much, purely by involves electricity, I suppose, is the national grid proposals for the pylons. And I'm a supporter of the offshore integrated solution. I think we do need to increase our capacity, but clearly the direction of travel is from the government on the current pylon proposals, and whether that's embedded in our spatial sort of strategy and looking at sites that are possible. So if I draw back on Langham again, where again there's a lot of interest of potential strategic growth around there, that's also one of the areas most heavily impacted by the proposed pylon scheme. And are we taking into account the potential infrastructure being put in place around pylons when we're considering sites that may go forward? Because I couldn't really see it, and I may have missed it, for which I apologise, but I couldn't really see much reference to that project in the papers prepared. Not really, not criticism, just trying to understand how we're thinking about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Lewis. Who's picking those points up?
I'll just pick up the housing first of all. We monitor completions, Lewis, so I think that you're right. The build probably took longer than a year, but they were actually finalised, ready for occupation for the start of the relevant term in September, October time. But I'll pass to Sandra. For the other one.
Yeah, I think in terms of the digital infrastructure, I think the infrastructure audit recognises that there is sort of potential to do better and to improve, and the opportunity to seek to require that particularly where it's particularly poor, and through policy in the plan. I don't believe there is, in terms of the pylons, I don't believe there is any reference to it, probably because at the moment it's just a proposal, whereas I think this is drawing on schemes and infrastructure that's that bit further on in terms of planning commitments.
Okay, thanks. Faye, Councillor Smalls.
Yes, I've got to think about how I phrase this. Throughout the reports, a few times low income is referred to in relation to housing, and I wonder how we get to what is a low income, because a lot of essential workers, so you could have a couple of people who are on the same wage, let's say nurses or teachers, and they could be in the same job on the same income, but if they're let's say a teacher who happened to have bought a house for 50k in the 90s, they might not feel they're on a low income. But if it's somebody who hasn't got a house, hasn't got money from other sources like family, and they've just that income is going to be really different to them when they're maybe paying £1,000 a month on rent and have got no hope of saving for a mortgage. So you can have people on the same income, but one might feel they're on a low, well, not feel, actually are a low income, but it's not. So I just wonder how we define that, the low income. And it's a bit about like on what Councillor Pearson said about the pensions and pensioners and things like that. So it's not just how much money you've got coming in, has it? If you've got huge rent and no chance of getting on the housing ladder, it's different.
just to do with the government definition of low income.
Yeah, and affordability in terms of housing and what's considered. It can't look into every particular circumstance. That's the trouble. So it's a sort of benchmark for an income level and disregards all the other factors that you mentioned, Faye. And, you know, you mentioned nurses and teachers, but I think the pandemic showed us that there's a lot more people that are critical to our everyday life post yes. Well, they were, weren't they? And, you know, so I've never really been keen on key worker housing, because how do you actually define who is a key worker when you think of it like that? So, yeah, it's a benchmark level, I'm afraid, for the area.
Thanks, Karen, that's well explained. Paul, Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, very briefly, just to pick up the observation on Councillor Kelly's comments about the university, which I thought was a very good one. I mean, we have benefited, albeit on a ratio of not 1-to-1, of bringing some housing numbers in quite rapid format, and also in very high density format. We could call it a bit of a windfall. I know that's not the right term in planning terms, in terms of the housing numbers, but when you look at the actual current demand for student accommodation, and you look at what the university is saying about their plans over the next few years, and the fact that we as an authority are renting some student accommodation, I think I'm right in saying, we probably can't rely on that happening in the near future. So that's going to be difficult. What I just wanted to pick up on was just on page 184, and I'm probably being a bit stupid here, table 6.9, estimated proportion of households living in private rented sector able to buy or rent market housing. So are these referring to people who are currently living in the private rented sector? Because if you pick up Tiptree, for example, 63% cannot afford to buy or rent, but if you take it at face value, they're already renting. Does that mean they're renting, but they're spending more than the sort of what we defined as being the reasonable limit on housing costs? Is that what we're saying? I'm probably misinterpreting it, but I'll just read it quickly. Page 184 at the bottom.
Sandra is studying it. Sounds like you can you use your microphone if you can.
Thinking out loud.
Think out loud into the microphone.
I suspect it's more to do with, again, it may be that people have the income to be able to buy or rent, but maybe not the deposit required to buy or rent. That's right. Without reading the preamble,
yeah, the point,
to that table.
Because it rather implies these people that are in private rented sector, but 60% of them can't afford to live in the private rented sector. So I'm just trying to work out what the actual table means.
Can we clarify? Come back afterwards and clarify that. Someone who lives in the private rented sector, I'd be very interested to know. So, yeah, we'll get back to you on that, Paul. Rhys.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is the bit where I now spend 10 minutes clarifying answers to people's questions on housing. So that table is absolutely what you're saying, Paul, that there are people who can afford to buy or rent currently. There are people who can afford to rent but not buy. And then there are people who can afford to do neither. And over the life of the plan, so going out to 2041, the people who can currently afford won't be able to afford in the long term. As they get older and cease to have income, they will no longer be able to rent or afford because they don't have.
So they're currently in private rented, but as things change over the next few years, 63% will not be able to afford to rent or buy. Okay, I understood it.
Yeah, as their incomes tail off through retirement or semi-retirement, they'll no longer be able to afford. That's the first thing. To Faye's point about affordability, Karen's absolutely right. It's a legal definition, and the best place for that definition is actually the council tax support scheme. That lists by bands and by income levels, who's entitled to what, and all the definition as to what is low income, etc., are included in that, which was buried in all the details at the last full council meeting. And then the question about right to buy, okay, just scrolling through notes from last Friday's board meeting. So the maximum right to buy discount has been returned back to the pre-2012 levels. So for the East of England, it has reduced from £102,000 back down to £34,000. So on an average council home, which is valued at around 250,000, the effective discount has reduced from 40% to 14%. The good news is that means we have less people being able to buy social housing from us, and therefore we have no need to replace them as such. But it also means we don't have as much income to reinvest in newer homes, and there's quite a fine balance between the stock that was being sold. Some of it is actually no longer economically viable for the council because it costs more and more in repairs as it gets older. So there is quite a lot of work to be done around that at the moment. But fundamentally, the number of people who will be entitled has come down. However, we had a huge surge in people applying for the right to buy, and the number of people submitting fraudulent applications for right to buy has gone up significantly as well.
Thank you, Reece. That's really helpful. Thank you for your knowledge from the CBH board. That's really helpful. Are there any kind of contributions tonight? Can I just say thank you for all those contributions. They've been very helpful. I'm sure the officers found them as well. Thank you for taking the time to read and digest all that information and coming up with some excellent questions tonight. I think that takes us to the end of the agenda. So what else have I got? Oh yeah, we need to note the progress. Can we note the progress made on the evidence base? Thank you very much. So with all that being done, any remains? We all right?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Just going to wish everybody a happy Christmas, and we'll continue with our very important work in 2025 in the new year. So have a good one and see you in the new year. Thank you.